This is the moment you've all been waiting for. Live with the best father and son team on the internet. It's time for Homie and the Dude.
What is happening, everyone? This is Homie and the Dude, the father and son TTRPG podcast, and we are delighted and privileged to be joined by Cmike from Fables D20. Cmike, we've been waiting for this one for a while, so thank you for joining us. Really looking forward to kicking back and having a great conversation.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to talk. I'm excited to talk about D&D, tabletop, and apparently airships.
Hell yeah. We'll get into we'll get into all that stuff. I wanted to dive in first because I mentioned to you before we kind of started recording that I've been a fan of yours for a very long time. I first kind of found out about you through my discovery of Corridor Digital and the amazing creators that they are over there, and the incredible team that you were a part of, and the amazing work that you contributed so much to, and the content that I love so much that you put so much of your time into. I wanted to ask you, obviously, it's been about 4 years since you made your I'm Leaving Corridor video, and I would love to just know how the transition from being part of that entity to, now going on your own, tackling the open road with Fables D20, how's that transition been for you, dude?
Unexpectedly harder than I thought. It's you are surrounded by other creators and you have a day-to-day job, and then you head off to do your own thing, and you also, on top of creating your own thing, that you're still trying to figure out how you want to express your creativity, right out of the gate. It's just, this is the idea, but then you have to hone that in over experience, taste, and just all the things that come with landing the plane, right? That plus freelancing to make sure that your creativity can survive in case it doesn't hit 100% to whatever the platforms that you upload to deem most valuable. And you see that even with bigger creators, is constantly trying to figure out, what does the platform want? And as smaller creators, you got to balance, well, I got to make a living, and I got to make this thing that I really want to make. And it's just constantly back and forth. And it's a lot harder than it looks. And after I left Corridor and I was able to come back to do Son of a Dungeon and learn even more about making D&D content, that was something that I and the guys talked about, is there's not enough information out there to talk about, or maybe there is, and it's just an experience thing, is when you go out to make your own thing, you build so much empathy for employers and bosses of smaller companies like Corridor, which is a small company, but a big channel. You get empathy for all the hard work that goes into just making ideas, just running the thing. And it's a lot harder than it looks.
Hell yeah. Do you know, I love every bit of what you said, because the level of honesty is it's unbelievable. And it's something that I feel like, it feels like there's like a lock-in key system to, like, some of these big creators who are like, we're not going to talk about the behind the scenes so much and express, that this is actually a very difficult thing for us, and, the money we're spending on this and the time that we're doing that. And, I personally just want to say that it was awesome to hear you say that, because, it's something that we experience constantly. We're constantly having conversations, Tom and I, about, adjusting our content, adjusting, how we're going to afford, the next Kickstarter, how we're going to afford, to upload, to make thumbnails this month, how we're going to afford to do this and that. And it's not easy, dude. It's that balance. And we literally had a conversation the other day of like, cool, 25 years down the road, if we look back on this, what do we want to have put all our chips on? What do we want to have, like, said, you know what, we banked on it, whether it failed or not, we're happy and we don't live with regret that we, you know, banked on these certain ideas and things that we love. And that's a really hard conversation to have with yourself. And, you know, for us as partners, it's a very hard thing to have between us and discuss, you know, where do we put the time? Where do we put the effort? Where do we put the resources? And how do we kind of tackle all of that stuff? So I really appreciate you saying that. And I think it's something that is not said enough in the TTRPG space, for sure.
And I think the other thing that resonated for me is what we're looking to explore, continually explore, and it feels like you have done the same with your D&D content, which is, you mentioned that you want it to be more of a cinematic experience, and really kind of, when you compare it to other types of D&D actual plays where, you know, you see 4.5 hours of, that's it. It's just, you know, turn on the camera and just let it run and see what happens.
Damn you, Critical Role!
Yeah, we all know who we're talking about. No, I mean, I started that way too. Not out of like a lack of creativity. It was just a lack of means. When Fables started, I only owned the 4 terabyte hard drive. That's it. The computer was a borrowed laptop from a place I was working. And I had to edit at 5 frames per second. So I didn't know what I was editing. And I was like, I just need to put it in picture. Just put it up. And it took me a month to get 1 episode done. For the camera and audio equipment, I had to borrow it from a friend in I'm in I'm not in downtown Los Angeles. I'm in K-Town, Los Angeles, and I had to go all the way to Burbank, which is, for me, around 10 miles. So I had to take an Uber to 10 miles away, pick up all the equipment, 10 miles back, set it up, and often the next day have to return it. And then on top of that, we started in our previous apartment, which was a studio with a Murphy bed. So we had to put up the bed just to put up the equipment. And we couldn't just, okay, we're tired after 4 hours of setup, 4 hours of gameplay, and now 2 hours half of takedown has to happen just to pull down the bed. And then I have to return all the equipment because it's just all borrowed. That's how it all started. And now I own all of it. And we're finally in a 1-bedroom where the tables can just be set for most of the time. So it's just like the progression of 4 hours just uncut, like here was the game, to now like, okay, there's more brain energy that can be had. Can we push it to editing? Can we, especially after Son of a Dungeon, where I finally got to have my fingers into what does it feel like to truly cinematically edit down D&D? Because tabletop games is, what's the reference? It's like 3 hours of gameplay, but it's only 30 minutes of fun. So it's just like cut down what's not needed. And Fables of Aida is really that true expression that I really wanted when we started, which is putting all that effort into making a cinematic experience with music, sound effects, camera switching. It's crazy.
that is the best. That is the best way to describe it. And you know what? We can truly. I don't think we've spoken to a lot of people. This is hilarious. We've spoken to a lot of people, and never have I heard anything that sounds so similar to the shit that we deal with on a week-to-week basis. So currently we are sat in my living room. This is my living room that we are sat in. You know, we have lights that we set up about an hour ago. We have a camera on a tripod that we set up, you know, our computing system, all the stuff that we're doing. And we have this set for when we do podcasts. We have another set for when we do our UFC live streams. We have another set for when we record the actual play. And we're constantly taking it down, putting it up, taking it down, putting it up, and doing all that. So what's interesting is I love how you were like, you know, we then after solidifying some of that, we then were able to put our mind towards the editing stuff. On our end was almost like a flip of that, almost like the opposite side of the coin to that is we started with really heavy editing. So we actually started early on. We had all of our own gear just because we had access to things that me, as someone who has loved filmmaking my whole life, has collected, you know, throughout my childhood and things like that, cameras and lights and little things that I've collected throughout my years and spent my pocket money on. And we started off really heavily edited. You know, we were having a person sit and, you know, spend hours putting sound effects in, you know, putting, you know, music on top of it, doing all the camera cuts, picture in picture of character art that we had, and NPC art and monster art, and, you know.
Averaging about 25 hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
Editing. Yeah.
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 Very, very heavy. Yeah.
And what we then have done, which is interesting, is we've now transitioned to more of a live production kind of situation where we don't actually live stream it. We do recordings, but we have someone who sat doing music, doing like sound effects, doing picture-in-picture camera switches and all that stuff live, so that we actually don't even have to do it in post. Now, the only thing we lose from that is obviously we're still putting out episodes that are anywhere between, you know, we aim for about an hour and a half typically, but anywhere between an hour and a half to 2 hours, you know, of recorded time. So it's super interesting to hear your journey, how you kind of started very similarly to us, but we both kind of diverged at a certain point to tackle it in a different manner. That's super interesting to hear.
I mean, I think what was funny is my entire time at Corridor, I've never owned a camera. So the first time I ever bought a camera was after Corridor. A lifetime of using it. Yeah, the editing with something we do for our current games is it's a balancing act on the audio. But once you start layering all the music, sound effects and stuff, it can get lost and you don't really worry about it. Is we actually play music and some background sound effects while we play. We used to not do that, but we do that now, which helps so much in just communicating tone, and especially with the lightings change. And we played on a speaker while recording. And what that allows us to do is three major things. First, everyone is more synced in the imagination and they feel more tuned in. Second, because we do a lot of editing, I didn't want to just release an edited cinematic version because I felt like there is an experience lost, like the 4-hour-long game, to actually just consume, because people enjoy that. So we use that raw music and ambient soundtrack saved in OBS, sync it to the uncut, where we cut just out the breaks that we get up and go around and do stuff. And we release that to our backers, so they have the uncut experience with the music that was played here at the moment. And then the cinematic version, it's just a reference track that gets swapped out for other sounds and musics.
Interesting. That's super. So I imagine, you know, the microphone setup you have is good enough to not be picking up some of that stuff, so that it's not, you know, too overbearing, you know, or anything like that for your guys.
It's good unless I start tinkering with the volume of the speaker too much.
Yeah, that's understandable. Yeah.
And is that so? It's its own music that's being played that will be different than the music that you're inputting in post. So it's just a thematic music that you selected beforehand that you'll be able to switch tracks on or what have you, for them to be consumed and enveloped in the story at that particular point. And then in post, you may or may not use that. You may use the same music, but you may not use that.
Correct.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's super interesting. It's super interesting.
We've had a couple of episodes where we were able to sync up the live production music so we could hear it.
Yeah, we at one point, because we do because we work with a lot of Americans and a lot of cross the ocean stuff, we do a lot of digital TTRPG streams as well. And for a while we were using Discord as one of our main kind of things, using, you know, the Craig bot in there to do a lot of the audio recording, backup recording with the Craig backwards bot, and, you know, putting in music bots and things like that so everyone else could hear it, as well as then pulling out that music in post and stuff as well. So yeah, it was an interesting experience. We've strayed a little bit further from that now, but we've now got some other alternatives to specifically when we play in person. Everyone in person can hear the music that's coming on, but when we do it digitally, we still just haven't quite worked out how to get the sound to everyone digitally, as well as then also recording it, and it's just a bit of a
If you
mess
want to
on
do,
that end.
if you want to do that, not to do a sponsored segment, but Describe is actually working on that system. So that way, and they showed it to me what the clarity of the audio, so you can share the Describe sounds and musics and stuff through the listening software for wherever you're doing it. I think they were talking about Discord as an example, but it sounded clearer than most like digital audio. I mean, like when we were talking through it, it sounded clearer than Zoom, Discord, even some phone calls I have. And I was like, holy crap.
Yeah. Do you know what? Thank you for that, because I've been tinkering with it and trying to like work, because as much as I'm the dungeon master, it also so happens that I'm the freaking techie guy as well. So I'm constantly
That's how it goes.
You know, like do all the little behind the scenes trying to work out how it all works and how to get all of that working properly.
Describe is, I saw they're prominent as a sponsor of yours on your episode. So yeah, we'll definitely take a look at that. The other thing that I think we feel in common with you that I think we're continually looking at, which is like, how do you differentiate yourself? And you've taken a really interesting track, so I want to touch on it in a second. But this notion of there are literally like, I don't know,
hundreds of thousands,
at least hundreds of actual plays out there, right? Whether now audio wise, we might be going into the thousands, right? But there's a ton of actual plays out there, and differentiating yourself in a pretty populated market with some sort of USP, some sort of like sizzle that just that thing, that concept is going to differentiate you. And then by then, after that, let's see how we do. Let's see how the DM is. Let's see how the story is. Let's see how the cast is. Let's see how the tech is, all of that stuff. But initially, like coming up with something that just gets you noticed in the sea of other, actual plays. So your tact has been, I'm going to tie mine to like movie references. So
yeah,
which I think is interesting.
Which is awesome. That's freaking sick. By the way, we love that. We're movie guys. We vibe with that massively, massively.
Yeah. So how much of that though has been like, how am I going to differentiate? Like, what are we going to do so that when people are sifting through that search term actual play on YouTube, how are we going to? How much of that has been a real thought of yours of like, how do we make ourselves different?
We put a lot of thought into it, and it's a balancing act of, I want to use the word baity, but it's not right. SEO friendly titling and marketing versus genre expectation marketing.
Yeah.
At first we went hardcore on SEO marketing, and it's not that we didn't see the numbers. We found difficulty in the branding, the tone of branding. And it's like, oh, this doesn't really match show. It matches the IP that we were branding, but it doesn't match the show. And so we went closer to the show, and we feel that we like it more because it represents the content in the media better. With Jaws specifically, I still think about like, oh, I should put Jaws on the title somewhere. But I've taken it out entirely because I feel like the pitch of the idea shouldn't be the idea itself, though. So it's like if I say, hey, I converted Jaws into a D&D adventure. So there's sharks, there's boats, let's have fun. if I say Jaws too much, you're going to think, why is a fantasy game not 1980s fighting a shark? So it's like, okay, so that inconsistency does exist with some of the upcoming adventures, such as like Dante's Peak. I'm going to lean harder into Dante's Peak as the main title because I feel like, I guess branding wise, Curse of Amity Island feels more cinematic than Jaws. Or Dante's Peak, I was like, what's the cinematic version of that? And I started thinking about all the in-world aspects of it. I was like, no one knows any of this crap. Then there's Dracula, which I kind of can't use the word Dracula, but we'll figure that out. The Mummy, Wolfman, Twister, Godfather, Cocaine Owlbear. It's really like the task I find interesting is like this little back end engine, right? Is what we like about a single world like Critical Role is it's the same place that we're going to. We can build our head canon with it, just like a Star Wars fantasy. We build the canon in our mind so that way we are familiar with the world. But that's a lot of content to absorb. So you want to do anthology stories, which is easier to consume, which is where the whole like movie ideas come from. They're all different movies.
Totally.
But then you start to care less every adventure because it doesn't matter which one I watch and which one I don't watch because none of it's consistent. So combining the two, that they're all anthology stories taking place in the same world, means, the process and the hard difficulty is adapting all that into one consistent fantasy world that stacks every adventure of canon.
Yeah. Dude.
All on different places of the timeline as well.
Dude, I'm blown away by that because, as the lead GM here at Homie and the Dude, we're doing the exact same thing as you. And don't get me wrong, like looking at Son of a Dungeon, that like blew my socks off. I remember when the idea was pitched. I remember when you guys, started talking about it and it started becoming public knowledge and, all this kind of conceptuality stuff came out. And I said to Tom, I was like, this is going to shake D&D. I was like, people don't know what it's going to do yet, but it's going to change the game. Like people, this is going to alter the way people do it. And you look at people like Viva La Dirt League who are doing, not similar, but, kind of similar stuff with their NPC D&D, with their green screen and they're dressing up in costume and things like that. I think it's finding that USP, but like you said, still having that genuineness to what you're creating, that truth behind it of like, this is still an amazing world that has, however many centuries or years or whatever, of lore that is consistent. And I really take my hat off to you because trying to fit into, and you've talked about a huge variety of genres of movies just then, everything from, even in your update video, you talk about Jaws, Dante's Peak, and A Knight's Tale, which when you look at them,
Knight's Tale is coming out we're filming that next year too.
First of all, super hyped for that. One of my favorite movies of all time. I'm super, super hyped for that. Also love that it's kind of Inception because they're already super aware that it's like a fantasy thing, but kind of modern. And you guys are then doing a fantasy thing of a modern thing that's modern fantasy. I love that. But I just have to take my hat off to you, dude. To be able to combine all of that into one world is spectacular. Like the level of effort and work that it takes to be able to have a section of world where you can run Jaws, where you can, have, like a Camelot kind of for Knight's Tale, a place where there's, more of that traditional kind of Western stuff going on, a place where you can have, Dante's Peak and, Godfather and, all these different things that realistically, when you look at them, how they tell the stories and how they do some of that and the themes of them are exceedingly different. So to bring that all into one world is pretty spectacular. And I have to just say, dude, like blew my socks off when, you know, you started working on all this and kind of getting towards that direction, because that's fucking hard, dude. Like that's some real shit right there. That's some real shit as a dungeon master, you know. So I just have to, I respect the hell out of that. What has been, I guess, your biggest challenge with trying to combine all of that? What's been the thing where, you know, when you're sat at either the computer or whether you write it by hand or whatever, and you're trying to build out these timelines and this lore and all of that, what's been the hardest part of making sure it does say consistent, you know, continuity across the whole thing?
First hardest thing was, how much do I deviate from the original IP?
Yeah.
Jaws and Curse of Amity Island do deviate a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just because it was the first dive into this. Like, well, we'll see how this goes. Because Jaws originally started as like, it'll be a fun one shot fighting a shark.
Yeah.
On a boat. But then you're like, that's not why everyone likes Jaws. Everyone likes Jaws because of the build up to the fight with the shark.
Yeah. Totally.
And I was like, crap, I need more material to like,
yeah.
And it built out to a way bigger adventure than it needed to be. Then, so that's one hard part. The next hard part, I think, is figuring out when something happens. Because it's not all happening at once. We're jumping currently how the adventures are going. Because after Curse of Amity Island, we have the Lost Mine of Colossal and the Haunting of Ruby Minnie's Inn, which are 2 one-shots that don't really have anything to do with a movie, but we had the opportunity to have some fun one-shots, so we quickly wrapped those.
Yeah.
National treasure.
Oh, okay. So Colossal is very national treasure.
Oh yeah, love it.
Because during Halloween, I made you watch all the scary movies.
And then the Haunting of Ruby Minnie's Inn is very Haunted Mansion.
And I guess
Cool.
the Haunting.
And the Haunting kind of
I love
slapped
how you
together.
I love how you have that like.
Who's this omnipotent voice? No, I'm joking.
He shows up all the time. So we have that, and it's like, what I'm currently doing is moving backwards, because one of the things I was afraid of is just moving forward and just like, okay, here's the world, and we'll world build as we go. Where it's like, when I started DMing, one of the biggest reasons to get my own world off the ground was my players knew more about the Forgotten Realms than I did. So I couldn't offer mystery or build up.
Right.
But at the same time, once you start your own world, there's too much mystery, and everyone's like, what is this and what's that? And you don't have answers.
Yeah.
And so one time we came to a ruined tower in the rain, and we fought some gargoyles, and someone asked, what's the ruins? How old are they? I was like, So I built a timeline.
Yeah.
And I came up with different ages that happen. Didn't know what I was like, okay, here are the ages. This is generally that. Oh, that's a cool name. That's generally that. That's a cool name. And so I was able to kind of answer those questions. So when it came to bringing that world to the show, what's going on with my voice? When bringing that game to the show, my thinking was, okay, let's play this game, and fairly inspired by Conan the Barbarian. It's like, here's this part in the Second Dawn. We'll play that, and then we're going to move backwards, adventure by adventure, so that way we can experience the history, the buildup of time that led to this moment. The hardest part about that is not overwriting history.
I was about to ask you that. I was about to say,
it's really hard.
That's a wild idea. Yeah, go on.
So I try to make jumps in time.
Yeah.
Right now. In the future, I have plans on hitting some overlapping time zones. And what's cool is you can watch. The goal is that you could watch the series either the way it came out
Mhm.
or in chronological order, and you'll have two different experiences.
Awesome.
Which is the same thing about anthology books like Conan the Barbarian.
Mhm.
What's also really cool is, as a dungeon master, you're normally not worrying about the protagonists in the story. You're worried about the antagonists and their plot. Well, moving backwards in time, I'm able to build up to a villain that's happening now in the present, but he's being mentioned as we're going backwards more and more.
Mm.
And the first time we're going to meet this villain is going to be not in the classic D&D. He's the boss.
Mhm.
No, we're going to meet the villain before they're the villain.
Mm.
Yeah, that's cool.
Love that.
Super cool.
And the hard parts, I would say, is it kind of falls into adventure design. What gets locked into place because I'm doing this thing?
Mhm.
Dante's Peak is a great example. A volcano erupts. Well, it's got to be more than a volcano because it's a fantasy game. But that means that's catastrophic. Okay, so what's bigger than catastrophic? Okay, where does that fit in the timeline?
Yeah.
Where it makes sense to things that I've already said
Mhm.
and doesn't overwrite the choices and the agencies of the players, but then still adds value. So that way you can go back and watch Curse of Amity Island and have a sense of the world now behind it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that's probably the hard part. And then making sure that lore and world building doesn't spill into running games. Because running a game is different than building a world and figuring out lore.
Totally.
I could see that would at points could really like make your head hurt because you know, what came to mind for me is, have you seen the movie Memento with it's an early
Yep.
Nolan movie? So really cool concept, but in execution, like it had to be, and also like as a viewer of the movie, you're in a position where you can kind of poke holes in it a little bit, but the concept is beautiful. The delivery of the concept, though, has to be hugely complicated because you're not only trying to tell like kind of a linear story, but also trying to fill in the gaps of where there are like some possible plot holes in the story of how, how does this thing unfold the way it does, going pretty much backwards or flipping backwards and forward. And I get this a similar like challenge from you, like going backwards. You have to almost like understand this much as opposed to this much because potentially this I guess the scope as you keep going backwards is really important to understand. Okay, what other dimensions might be affected by this? What other connections might be affected by this? And if I don't get it right, then there might be some big gaps in here. There might be some obvious like holes in the continuity of it. So is that something that that is in play a little bit?
It is. I feel like whenever I'm world building, I'm keeping in mind the adventures that have happened. So I feel like I'm living momentum. The most important thing and the hardest thing is player agency.
Mhm. Yeah.
Let's see that.
I don't want to be in the situation where I'm writing a book and having a one-man show.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I have to write a book so players feel like they're in a tangible world.
Yeah.
So it's like whenever we go back, the outcome has to be able to be either or, win or lose. but yet the event still has to happen.
Yeah.
So the one shot's not out, but one of the one shots that we have, The Haunting of Ruby and Minnie's Inn, the red dwarf from Curse of Amity Island, Halig, his father is trying to get home for Halig's first week of being alive. He was just born. He got word he wants to head home. He's hiring adventurers to help him get there in the middle of a decade winter.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, and the player who plays Halleck, Chris, he's in the one shot playing a whole nother character, and the plot is, hey buddy, do you save your dad, or does your character from this other game grow up without a father? That's what this game's going to figure out.
Yeah.
Dude, and so it's like anything, either or could happen, but that event of that moment is important for mentioning some character stuff.
Yeah. Do you know what's interesting? So we like
play around with a little.
I was going to say we've experienced some of that stuff as well. So my current homebrew world, because I very similarly experienced to you. I picked up Lost Mines of Phandelver as my very first D&D thing because
Same.
As does everyone. And while running it, I was just like, man, I'm so disingenuous to this content. Like, I'm just not doing it justice because I don't believe in it. I don't know it well enough. I don't know the area. I don't know like the character, like the NPC. I don't care. Actually, was what it came down to. I was like, me personally, I don't really care about this world and the stuff in it as much. So I came back to, I need to create my own world that I care about, that is something that is going to matter to me and thus matter more to my players and give them something to care about and things like that. So I started making my own world as well, which I call the Sky Realm. And, we have been running our actual play. We're about 30 episodes deep at this point. I imagine it will probably run somewhere to, I mean, we're trying to, we're trying to round it out realistically, but I reckon we're looking at a 50 mark kind of number. And it's been a wild journey. We've talked about doing series earlier in the timeline, and it's that same thing of like choosing a moment in the timeline or a section of the world that almost feels in a weird way disjointed, but still you can tease little things. So for example, like Tom's first D&D character that he made for my homebrew world is called Ulrich Emberheart. He's one of my favorite characters just ever. And he's this legend smith. He was once one of the few dragon riders of my world, and he's this legendary blacksmith that used to do smithing with his dragon. And since then, his dragon has been killed, but he still kind of is in the world. And my players since then have met the character, and Tom has met his own character, like you've said, your player experience as well. And that's a super rewarding moment. It's a super rewarding moment for people who know Ulrich. People like, Tom was like, oh my God, it's Ulrich. My mother who plays in our game was like, oh, Ulrich, and it meant a lot in that moment. But in the same way, you want to also have it isolated enough so that you can tease little things, but it doesn't, like you said, destroy the continuity of, for example, our actual play starts with a cataclysmic event where a gentleman invents a gem that is exceedingly powerful because all of our Sky Zephyrs are powered by ceruleanite power gems, and he invents one that is the most powerful one yet. It's large. It can produce the most energy that has ever been able to be produced in a gem ever, basically. And the oppressive powers that be want to use this so that they can oppress everyone else, steal water, and just be awful government. Classic stuff along the line. And if we jump back in the timeline, if our players do anything that affect the building of that stone and things like that, then it almost, devalidates it. It makes everything that we did in the Sky Realm not real. It makes it, in my opinion, then that continuity is missing. So it's a really hard thing. So, we've talked about doing ones, actual plays inside creatures that are in our world. Like we have the Night Deceiver from the book, which is this huge fish that has cities inside of it that floats around in the skies and eats airships, basically.
Right.
And we were like, let's tell a story of the people that live inside of one of these fish, and actually that they need to escape and then experience what the outside world is like on this different timeline and things like that. And so we've spoken about it, but we've not brought it to fruition yet, because the concept, and why I respect what you're doing so much, is because that concept is so hard to try and make it happen.
It's the butterfly effect, right?
Yeah.
One little thing.
Exactly.
Ripple into something else, and then pretty soon, that big event or that important event that is, it's key, it's pivotal to your world build, could be affected in a way that it starts not making sense anymore. You start, then you start bending it. Like you said, you want to allow your players to have agency. And if you get to a place where they're stretching too much into areas that are uncomfortable with the world that you've built, now you are now struggling with how much agency do I give them, because this could start compromising my big build here.
Which is why go for it. Yeah, go for it. No, dive in.
So a couple things on that. There's like two massive dials, because my world is flexible. Here we go. If Oppenheimer existed in my world, and he is making the atomic bomb, and in the process of this, we also are talking about how to make the hydrogen bomb. This is a real thing that happened. While this is happening, other factions are trying to do the same thing. So if we're having an adventure where Oppenheimer is the villain, and we have to stop Oppenheimer from making the atomic bomb, we are not stopping the creation of the atomic bomb. We're stopping Oppenheimer.
Love that.
So
because the atomic bomb is going to be invented.
Yeah.
We can't stop Judgment Day.
Similar to the left-right conundrum of you always lead to the same place. Yeah.
It's like the big thing that changes the world, somebody will get there. We can't stop innovation. We can't stop people from thinking. A small change in the world that I have is some of the maps that show up in Curse of Amity Island. Up north, it says New Iron's Edge. I've already changed the world of the name of that city, because it never has happened. We haven't had an adventure there yet, right? So now it's called Molbul. Molbul is a magocracy that resembles 1920s Germany and fascism.
Love it. Love it.
If they were not going to do it, another set of mages who feel like controlling other people because they have the power to do so would pop up somewhere else.
Yeah.
An adventure that's going to happen there is Saving Prince Ryan, where
nice. Nice. That's it. Yep. Love it. Yep.
Where we tackle that, and it's like, yeah, we're fighting these guys who went the route of evil dictatorship. And because they did it, that ripples across the world. Dante's Peak, whatever happens at Dante's Peak, even if the players stop the main thing or save the people of the town, a volcano erupted. Something bad happened. There are like with Sky Zephyra, where it's like the gems were made by this person who invented them. If you have an adventure around the invention of those gems, that NPC can still die before the creation of them.
Yeah.
Maybe a player steps in and finishes it.
Yeah.
And history recognized him making it, not the player.
Yeah.
Because history is full of holes and things that aren't mentioned along the way. Or let's say it does stop. The NPC can't make the gems and it all collapses. But somebody else entirely makes it.
Yeah.
And the players just changed history. And what does that mean canon wise for the players in the previous game who thought he made it? Rather than going, oh, now the timeline is splitting.
Oh, Marvel, is that you? Oh my goodness.
You can chalk it up to, well, you guys knew the original person who started it. It's kind of like D&D. Is it Gygax or the other guy?
Yeah.
You know? Or you refuse to acknowledge this new person who made it. You focus on this. It wasn't the Russians who made the first atomic bomb. Oppenheimer did all the legwork. They stole his idea. That's why the adventurers in that first adventure see that person as the inventor.
Yeah.
Like Tesla and Benjamin Franklin, like they, you know.
Yeah. Dude, I love it. And it's thank you for solving a problem for me. No, I appreciate it. It's something that, you know, I've been toiling with for a while, and it's something that that is a super interesting headspace. And you're totally right. You know, it's about making sure that, you know, the large canon events happen regardless of, you know, who's doing it. And realistically, that's how it happens. You know, at some point, you know, World War III is going to happen and nukes are going to fly, and it's just whether it's Russia, Israel, America, you know, it's going to happen at some point, you know. So I fully agree with what you're saying, and I think it's a really, really, really solid point. Yeah, it's a super good strategy. Something else that, you know, we've done in a way that we've actually solved this problem, and I know that people in the community definitely are not a fan of what I'm about to say. So hot take. But we did a series called it's Avatar: The Last Airbender, The Last Breath, basically. And it's a 4-part series, basically set in a bit of the Avatar Last Airbender world timeline that doesn't really get documented much, both in the TV show, in the Magpie game, and very much in the world whatsoever. It's the inception of the 100-Year War, basically. And
yeah,
we told the story of one firebender, two airbenders, and one earthbender that were present for the massacres of the airbending temples across the world. And, you know, the story, which, by the way, I have to say, it's the thing I'm most proud of that we've ever created. I think the plot is stunning. The work that our players did, Tom being one of them, was just spectacular. You know, I think back to it and it makes me want to cry even now. It was just such a, you know, a powerful, moving thing that we told. And it felt like one of the few stories that I've ever been like, wow, we really needed to tell that story, because it almost hints to things and stuff like that. So what's interesting about the way we did it, though, is we had a kind of destined idea of what each episode, we only did 4 episodes, what was kind of going to happen in each 4 episodes, with the understanding that the players could go about it and change things and do things as they wanted and deal with the moment in whatever way they wanted. We simply just had checkpoints that needed to be hit. Things like, you know, in the first episode, we start with this beautiful wedding that's happening between an airbender and an earthbender, and it's this gorgeous ceremony with hundreds of people. It's super, super beautiful. And then the Fire Nation attack. And it's just an absolute shit show. And so we knew we were going to hit the checkpoint of wedding. We knew we were going to hit the checkpoint of Fire Nation attacking. We didn't know how these guys were going to deal with that stuff happening around them and what decisions they were going to make to, you know, save one another and to be able to deal with some of this stuff. So we ended up almost writing what I would consider more of a movie, because we knew and we knew at the end of it that everyone was going to die. We knew spoilers for people. We knew that our players were all going to die. The concept started with, let's tell a story where there's a TPK at the end, one, like, guaranteed. We know there's going to be a TPK at the end, and we know that everyone's going to die, but it's going to be for this beautiful reason, and they're going to have an amazing last stand, and it's just going to be a lot of stuff that kind of links to the Avatar world. And we ended up finding that it worked really well to have this kind of balance between checkpoints and player agency, where we knew we were trying to hit moments and the players were working towards those moments, but also in between that, dealing with things in a very, standard kind of TTRPG practice way, which is, we're going to make wild decisions. We're going to do hilarious things. We're going to, make ridiculous choices that are going to surprise me and shock me as a GM and make me have to think on my toes and all that kind of stuff. But it ended up being this thing that, we came away from going, wow, like that was an amazing thing, because we had this almost predetermined checkpoint, of plots that we were, trying to hit. And like you said, and something that I didn't even clock until you just said it, was something that I almost built into it was, we dealt with the fact that Aang had gone missing. He'd run away and fallen into the water, and no one knew where Aang was. We had one of the gurus from his temple come to the Eastern Temple and tell these guys that Aang is alive, that the Avatar exists, that we need to tell the White Lotus that the Avatar is alive. This message needs to get to the White Lotus. So one of the NPCs that was part of our party actually was saved by our group of players and was the only person to survive the massacres of the Air Temples. They then went out into the world and formed the White Lotus that Avatar Aang did exist and that he is alive somewhere out in the world. And there was just that moment of like, it's still very much linked to Aang is alive, the airbenders are dying, and this thing is happening no matter what. But the way we told it was so different to what, Nickelodeon told, or, what Magpie Game kind of had written in their lore and things like that, that it ended up being this very unique and different kind of tale, which I think, was super, super awesome. But, it made me think when you just said that we utilized that tool without even knowing it, that, we had these events happening, irregardless of characters that may not exist in canon lore or anything like that. And all these people, and, we have, a Beifong, we have one of Toph's ancestors is she's one of the characters, and having that in there, having those links meant that, people can, like you said, look back on the world history and be like, wow, oh shit, the Beifong family were involved in the massacres at the air temples, and they actually helped, save Aang. And part of it was them getting this information about Aang out. And, it then links Toph and Aang's story even deeper when you then watch the TV show because of, what we told. So, dude, it's a concept that I'd never considered, and I really appreciate you enlightening me to that. I love learning, dude. Thank you for teaching me. I want to be the best GM in the world one day, and I can't do that without picking up some tools along the way from incredible people like yourself. So I very much appreciate that.
Can I ask you guys a question?
Hit it.
Is that only work best in a short series environment? Does it
No,
does
it
get more
works.
complicated as you go further and further?
You're talking about the checkpointing thing?
The checkpointing.
It can work on a long form campaign. Because what you're essentially talking about is partially because those checkpoint plots, dungeon masters and game masters have, for the most part, have that already. Because they're like trying to just have a couple steps ahead of the adventurer.
Totally.
So that way it's like, I can kind of know where they're going, but at the same time, I'm hyper focused on the moment. And you're kind of just like letting the players in on some of the major checkpoints that you have prepared for the adventure. Very similar thing is for A Knight's Tale that I'm preparing. We know that we're going to these towns for the tournament. Those are checkpoints.
Cool.
That's going to happen. So we know that our RP is going to be built around those tournaments at those towns and traveling to those towns. There are it being limited to a shorter game is kind of helpful because it's less things everyone is worrying about, because that's something players don't have to normally think about. So you're kind of having them all be GMs at the same time, trying to working together to get to what this destination is. You see that in the Calamity game from Critical Role, is everyone knew that it was going to end up a certain way, and that there were these couple checkpoints that probably some form of way or another have to happen. And the biggest thing that you did right is communicate ahead of time, like, let's play a game that ends in a TPK, story-wise. Not that you guys lose, but the story is it is a TPK, everyone dies. And the fun part is figuring out, kind of like a horror game, what are the things that you do along the way before it happens? Yeah. What changes can you impact on the world and the adventure and the other players before you die?
Yeah.
So it's all about communication and what is important, especially a short, intimate game like a 4-episode series. Knowing the checkpoints is actually super helpful for players, because if you think in a video game kind of sense, knowing that I have to get here, go to that town and do that, and then go there, right? Yeah. Like, it's understanding the mission of the game.
Yeah.
I might not know what exactly happens there, but I need to know that I got to go from here to there, to there, to there.
Yeah, yeah. It's a super solid point. Like in Skyrim, you got to get to Whiterun, but you might get attacked by a troll along the way that you weren't expecting, kind of thing, or things like that. Totally. Yeah.
So along those lines, and with the knowledge that we are creating content that, in the best hope, is being consumed, maybe being consumed by a huge audience, to what extent are you, and maybe your players as well, aware of this is a performance for consummation?
I was about to go down this route. I was about to go down that route. Yeah, it's a great question.
Because you said it earlier, a TTRPG game is 3 hours or 3.5 hours of gameplay and 30 minutes of fun or great experience, that type of thing. So when we're creating this content, what we do want is that 30 minutes, as much of that 30 minutes as possible in our content, to really engage, to hook the audience. How much of that are you guys aware of, you as the GM and also your players?
So it's a balancing act. So first, everyone at the table agrees that they like having a camera on them when they play, because it teaches them to have pressure on their choices. What I've learned is how to adapt making actual play into better habits for just gameplay. It's like less talking over each other, because the microphone can't really hear everything. Still fumble at that, but it's a good habit to build, to listening to somebody else, waiting your turn. The goal for every game is to entertain each other and play a fun game, and ideally create an interesting story with each other. And the audience get to witness that. Now, I might, as the dungeon master, remind my players, hey, can you describe what that looks like? That way I can, not just for everyone to hear it, but I have that in the edit. And I might flourish my description a little bit here and there just to have that. But I'm also not changing. I am designing my descriptions around my players. So I have ADHD. I know what can overwhelm people very quickly. You walk into a room, there are 10 NPCs. I'm going to describe 10 details about every 10 NPCs. Yeah. Podcast might be okay with that. Yeah. But the game cannot survive on that. Yeah. So it's like, there are 3 NPCs, okay? And there are 3 details per NPC. When you guys choose to interact with an NPC, I'll give you 3 more about that NPC. So, it's following the how a GM should reveal information to players, and taking that core idea of running a great game and flourishing that for camera and microphone.
Yeah.
But the priority is running a great game, because what people enjoy watching are people having fun playing this game.
Yeah.
So if everyone's not having fun, it gets a little bit harder, especially on camera, where waiting your turn looks different. Whereas on a podcast, waiting your turn is non-existent.
Yeah.
Right? So on camera, move, jump, do this. In audio form, you can have more breaths. You can wait your turn, do this, and stuff like that. And then it's also, what's the goal everyone wants to be here for? And what's the compromises that everyone's willing to have? Are we all here to tell a cool story? Great. That means gameplay doesn't really matter. To a certain degree, we do want to play the game, but story comes first.
Yeah.
Or is there a higher demand for having a fun game that we're all excited to play?
Yeah.
Well, then that is a priority. And then because we're recording and needing to tell a story, the clever ways of sneaking the story in, such as describe things clearer, more flourished, but keep them very tight, so that way it doesn't interrupt gameplay. Cut lore that doesn't matter. Get rid of it.
No exposition.
Doesn't. If it doesn't, yeah, kill your babies. If like, that's why I'm starting a podcast with my friend Chris, who plays the dwarf in Curse of Amity Island, the lore of Aida. We whatever lore that doesn't make the final cut, or even in the uncut, lore that is mentioned but then not explored. What's the deal with that? Why are dwarfs red? Why are there no elves? These are things that we don't need to talk about in the game because they're not relevant to the adventure.
Yeah.
If we watch Saving Private Ryan, we don't want to know what's going on in American politics. We just want to focus on the team saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
I wanted to say Prince right there. So the lore podcast is really like, I will talk about the world and lock things more in a softer, locked in canon, because these are the things I thought about while building the adventure, but don't need to be in the adventure.
Dude, I love that.
I hope that answered the question. I can't remember the question now.
Well, it was basically around performance versus
yeah.
versus organic.
So yeah, right. For me as a GM, it's a little bit of a harsh criticism for myself, but I try to compete with the last piece of entertainment my players had.
Interesting. Dude, I love that mentality. And I also really, something that you said, which I think I do just because I'm also neurodivergent. And for me, if there were 10 NPCs in a room, just as a GM, I'm like, this is too much. I can't be dealing with all of this. So I think I naturally do, even though, one of my favorite things that I have is that there's an NPC in our world called Constantine Plainview. And Tom has actually played this character. He's taken the role of the NPC in another little actual play series that we did. And one of my favorite things about him is I know underneath it that he is actually a closeted homosexual. He keeps that very under wraps for himself, and he attends a lot of LGBTQ plus events in my world that are underground for himself because he is a prominent member in a mafia family. And for him, he feels like he doesn't want people to know some of the things about him that could be used against him, basically. And it's a dangerous space to be in. It's something that Tom really appreciated about the character when, Tom was like, oh, okay, I'm going to play Constantine. And I was like, that's cool. Here's some stuff about him. And Tom was like, oh, I didn't know that. That's really interesting about him that, we've been seeing him as this one thing during the game, but actually there's this like underlying lore that exists. And I think that's really important. Like you said, giving the players what's almost relevant. Dude, I'm sure you and I understand, there's mountains of things that will never come up in a game. There's hundreds of things that will never ever see the light of day that we've written on paper, on document, in computer or whatever, that will never ever be known by anyone. But the fact that we know it allows us to pick and choose the things that are super relevant in that moment to deliver to your players and to really kind of fill that story with life and things like that. So I think that point you made is just really super valuable. And any GMs that are out there listening who are, wondering about that kind of stuff. And, to me, exposition's a big thing. I hate in movies when someone's like, oh, and look, on the 14th day, it did this. And I'm like, me, really? I'm just going to have to sit here and listen to you tell me about this stuff so that later in the movie it becomes relevant to me? Like, I don't care. Like, just give it to me in an organic way. And I think that's such
Which is hard.
It's super hard. It's super hard. I fully agree with you. It's super hard to do instead of just doing the classic lore dump, as we call it, And so I just really appreciate that mentality that you have. And, I feel like actually your GM style sounds very similar to mine across the board in the way that you think about your players and you're thinking about the story and you're thinking about, fun, telling a good story, having a good game, all the kind of layers that you talked about sounds very similar to how I kind of go about my games. And I just really respect it, dude, and appreciate your insight on all this stuff. And I think it's a lot of things that, again, like, it's weird for me because you look at, when you first get into GMing and you Google, how to be a good dungeon master, for example, or what are 5 tips to be a good dungeon master? And you have Matt Mercer and his like GM tips, and you have Brendan Lee Mulligan, being like, and Chris Perkins being like, use the books, and all this shit, What they don't tell you is some of this deeper layer stuff, some of the like almost philosophical stuff of, being a GM, of like, good practices that allow you and your players to have more fun, to not just be sat listening to a GM do a lore dump or a player tell you their entire backstory or, this, that, and the other. And because it comes out more organically in the moment. And I think like you said, it's super hard to do. And I think it's a skill that requires practice. It requires, just like everything in D&D, being a good player, being a good GM, being a good improvisational actor, being and any part of the pie that you want to cut of D&D requires practice. It requires repetition. It requires you doing it and learning and gaining feedback and, adjusting the way you do things and doing all that stuff. And I feel like none of that is fucking talked about in amongst the upper echelon that we all kind of look at and go, wow, like bow down to the Abria Iyengars, bow down to the Brennan Lee Mulligans. And it's very rare that I feel like I hear them go, it's super. Tell them only the relevant in lore. Do think about it in this way. Consider. And I don't feel like that's talked about very much. So I appreciate you saying all of that, dude. Sorry, go for it. I'm gonna just run to Lou quickly. Sorry, I'm so desperate. Damn kidney.
But the story comes first. Just those 3 words. If you have that centralized somewhere in whether you are the DM or you're a player. That can be your guiding light, right? That can be your, I think your almost compass to keeping yourself from straying into places where it does get a little bit tedious with too much mechanics, too much grind in how am I going to beat this guy? What's the absolute best action I can take right now? Where, dude, that 5 minutes or 30, whatever it is that you're thinking about, that grinding through that problem solving really isn't like what this is about. For story comes first. Story comes first is like timely, poignant, flow of the story, complementing what's going. And if you don't get your absolute best action in that turn, it isn't important. Like something's going to happen that's slightly different, and it's going to be just as good or better actually, because you didn't have to dwell on it. You didn't have to come out of character, and you have to ask the DM 4 different questions above table about, what I can do and what I can't do and all this other stuff. You just kind of went with the story. And I think, that those 3 words that you said, story comes first, really kind of symbolizes it for me, whether it's sharing what's relevant or making sure the story
Can I challenge you?
Go for it.
I'm going to challenge you right now because I agree. Story for me as a GM always does come first. It's something that I very much feel like that's one of my key things as a GM. But something that I learned that I really appreciated about, I'm not sure if you've seen Crown of Candy by Dimension 20. When Ali Beardsley discovers who like does the poisoning very early on in the campaign, and it threw Brennan completely off because they roll an incredible roll. You know, he gives them some information, and they, with this information, basically derail a mystery, this political mystery that Brennan had been planning. And he talks about this in I believe, the adventuring party after the episode. And at that moment, he put game first because, you know, he was like, I've got an idea of where I want this plot to go. I've got a kind of conceptual idea of where this plot's going to go. And then Ali comes in with this nat 20 that throws a spanner into his whole thing. And suddenly game came first for him in that moment. And I respect that. I really love that. It taught me something about, you know, in moments like that, as a GM, you got to let go. You got to just let go of the reins and be like, okay, I'm here for your ride kind of thing.
It's a mod podge of both. So it's like,
yes, yeah,
expectations, you know. If I'm Naughty Dog designing The Last of Us,
yeah,
story is absolutely important because look at the results. Player choice, gameplay is super important because that is how the players experience the story. And I told a friend the other day, and he disagreed with me, but that's beyond the point, is Last of Us 2, without giving spoilers, Last of Us 2, I think is worse game design, more focus on story.
I agree.
Because there's a certain part of the game near the climax that there is no player agency. If you don't do exactly what the story wants you to do, you die, start over.
Yeah.
Whereas, and they can still add player agency. Let's look at the climax of the first Last of Us. Here's a spoiler. When you enter the doctor's room near the end, 90% of players shoot the doctor.
Yeah.
You don't have to shoot the doctor to go pick up Ellie. That is good game design, because the moment you as a player learn you didn't have to shoot her or shoot the doctor, you go, wait, I want to try that again. Why did it? Do I have to kill anyone? Was I just pre-programmed? Was I in the Matrix at that moment?
Yeah.
Right? That's good game design. Saying that a simple choice existed, and thus you start changing the way you thought about the whole thing. But if, I have to do this thing just to move on to the next one, that because story's in the way, that's not good design. But all the players and the game designer, or the GM and players, can all agree up front, like, hey, we want to do a good story, or we want to do a fun dungeon crawl, right? Both games can exist. We can both have Last of Us and Super Mario.
Love that example. Beautiful.
But like you're saying, when you're playing the game, especially tabletop role-playing games, what matters is happening at the table, right? This is what matters. It's like hanging out with your friends. If someone's getting mad that the controller's not working, pause the game, take a break. Let's maybe see if we can fix a controller, and make sure the time that we're spending with each other is good. That's like Matt Colville said it best. We're making music.
Yep.
That's what we're doing. We can make a bunch of music together, different ways, but we're making music together. You know, it's not, there's the composer orchestrating the musicians. No, we're just a band in a garage making music together.
Yeah.
So it's that balance and expectation of what's the priority of the game, story or gameplay. Cool. But once you're playing the game, you're playing the game. You got to be flexible. You got to be patient, and you're not the star. It's a group activity.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Drew, I have one final big thing that I want to ask you, because I've seen your actual play series, and you have this stunning GM screen. You've got this stunning GM screen, and I can see that there's things that you've clipped onto it, and I can tell that there's some mania going on behind the screen. I wanted to ask you, what are some of the tools that you're using behind the screen? Do you have, initiative cards? Are you using a stream deck to, change lighting and, do music? Are you one of those GMs that has it all on paper and are writing their notes in paper? Do you have a laptop in front of you? Do you have your minis back there? What's kind of your behind the screen setup? Because as a GM, I'm always curious. I love seeing pictures of like Matt Mercer when they're showing the set, and you can see behind his screen, I'm like, oh, look at all the different things he's got there. That's so interesting. Or like, oh, look at what Abria's got going on over there. There's so little behind her screen. That makes me very curious as to what she's doing, and how she's thinking about stuff. So I'd love to know, what's your GM screen setup? What are the tools that you're using behind your GM screen so that you can both tell a great story and play a great game?
So because I'm controlling lights and music, I have a stream deck, and because of that, I have a laptop in front of me, and I utilize that laptop for the notes. And the primary notes that I use are writing down hit points, maybe a name, and I keep track of whatever like checkpoints of the adventure, especially if it's a one shot. What were the checkpoints in that one shot? Or because I have 4 players, the 4 scene/encounters I'm hoping to get to in this session, which is something I recommend new GMs do, is just prepare the number of scenes that you want to have equal to the number of players exist. Just have that prepared, and we'll get there. Some might not make it, but you had those 4 and you're fine. So that's what I have behind the GM screen. I have 2 D20s, no other dice.
Oh, I like that. Okay.
If it's a weird dice that has to get rolled, I make a player roll it for me.
Love it.
If an NPC needs to make a roll, I make the players roll it. What else do I have back there? I occasionally have minis when I know it's big combat time. But then the problem is I then overload putting more minis there. So that way when the players walk by, because they have to walk by my GM screen to get to there. So I was like, you don't know what's going to actually come out.
The old cloak and dagger.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
The tool, and that's pretty much it. If I didn't control lights and music, I would probably have just a notepad and a pencil. But even on a home game, I like having a Bluetooth speaker in front of the GM screen and just controlling just a little bit of stuff, because it brings everyone's brain a little bit in.
Yeah.
Especially when you think of competing with the last piece of entertainment you might have consumed. I'm competing for your attention against a movie, a video game, both millions of dollars worth of design. I'm not that. TikTok, Twitter, YouTube. I'm competing with all this that has billions of dollars backing its ability to grab your attention. Putting a little speaker, putting out some toys goes a long way, and just like, hey, focus here. What else do I have behind the GM screen? My microphone. That's
Yourself.
pretty much myself. What I used to do, and I don't do that much anymore because I have the laptop and I can quickly check something on an app or a website, is my GM screen. I would glue the rules that I'm least familiar with, but feel are the things that come up the most. So I have all the ability checks, all the types of magic.
Yep.
And I'm like, that's what I struggling to memorize, but needs to exist. I got the ability checks figured out. The magic needs to get a bigger spot on the GM screen. I have all the damage dice for all the weapons. Because a common question is like, what do I roll? D6.
Nice.
So that's how I use the GM screen, is I put rules that I think are important, but I haven't yet memorized. That's about it. I don't have that many dice because I play with flat damage. So no one rolls damage. On a home game, I might let the players roll damage if that's what they want. But for on-camera games, we don't roll damage. It's something that gets edited out already. So why not just get rid of it? And we all agree that flat damage is what we're going to do for the sake of time. And if you crit, it's max damage.
Are you taking average otherwise? You're taking the
half the damage die plus the modifier.
Love that. Awesome. Yeah.
That is great.
Yeah, it's a great show. It is a really great show. I think also what you said about getting players to roll stuff is a super interesting concept that I'm definitely going to think about.
The first scene of the first episode of Curse Amity Island, we go into a flashback for Halleck. And his town is raided. My biggest issue with starting the show that way was when I was thinking about it, I was like, I have 3 other people at my table who are going to sit there for 10 to 15 minutes doing nothing. And that's their starting expectation of the game. That's, at the right table, that's a reason to not play with that GM ever again. It's like, oh, right when we start 15 minutes and I don't do anything, I might be able to sit through this because you're recording it for your channel, whatever. But like, it's a home game and I'm sitting here for 15 minutes doing nothing, and it's the start of the game. That's really harsh. So I have not just other NPCs in the flashback rolling. I have events. So Halleck turns to run to his burning house to save his wife. I turn to a player, not even having Allie roll. I ask her straight up, does he make it in time to save her or not? No roll. Tell me yes or no. And I pull her into the game, and her first choice is crucial. Great. He gets to the house. I turn to Jordy. When he kicks in the door, does the door fall on top of him or not? Like, because it's a burning building. Does it all come down on him? And he goes, yes. Roll a dexterity save. And then when we get to the wife, she's caught in a burning building with smoke. I turn to Taco. I go, roll a Constitution saving throw for her to see if she survives. And now they're all a part of the experience, this solo experience.
And
fucking genius.
Yeah, it's great. Makes it so interactive, immersive. It's great. It's a great tool.
And it's like, I don't need to be rolling these dice. Like, I don't need to be playing D&D by myself.
It also forces your players in a weird way, like,
to pay attention more.
I was gonna say, not even like, it's not pitting them against each other, because that is in no way what it's doing.
But it does feel that way.
Yeah, exactly. Like, when you ask, do you get there? And homie looks down the table and goes, do I get there? Like, it becomes a moment of like, okay, are your players going to crumble under the pressure of each other? Are they going to stand to one another? Are they going to play for the story in the moment? Or are they going to play to help their friend?
And it's also
that's
each other's
interesting.
taste in storytelling. Like
Yes,
Allie loves romance. Yes, he's going to make it to his wife.
Yeah.
As Taco, no, he doesn't make it because I want to hurt him. Right? It's their taste. And it's kind of diversifying the situation and the obstacle. Right? It's kind of that weird ideal thing that corporate America kind of wants all the time, is different perspectives from different backgrounds and different tastes influencing the creation of the story or the product. You got 4 other people. You got 4 other brains. Like, you don't need to lock it all in place. Just do situations, little challenges like a video game. Each one, and just put the choice on everybody else. And then you walk away from that situation and that session with everyone's brains richer.
Yeah.
Because we got to experience everyone's perspective and taste and choices. And that can be applied for NPCs where they're like, what was the last one? Gosh. The next episode that's coming out, a big thing happened, and I needed to sit there and roll dexterity saving throws for almost 7 NPCs. I was like, you guys roll. While I think on how to narrate what happens.
That's also another benefit of it, isn't it? Like, you don't have to worry about just
managerial skills. It's delegation.
It's delegation. Exactly. But it does give you that space to have a few more moments to collect your thoughts. Pacing, I think you can pace a little bit better sometimes when you're DMing and you're doing, you're spinning all the plates and you're not quite as aware of, the actual arc, the intent of the storytelling. And this allows you just come up above the table a little bit more, to read the scene, take a breath, assess exactly what's happening, and then be able to kind of, turn the dials at the appropriate pace, which I think it's really interesting that you can do that. You're just kind of giving off a little bit of your responsibility to free up your mind.
I fully agree. I think, God, if there's a nugget in this podcast, God, that's a piece of treasure right there for GMs out there. And it's, something, I have done like very minorly in situations, but never to the extent that you're talking about. And I think you're right. I really love the. I'm a straight up steal that. I'm a use that going forward, because that's genius. I really like that. And as a GM, I very much enjoy the descriptive part of it and things like that. And so having that space to focus and not have to roll, and also, like, in a weird way, I'll put this out there as well. As a GM, roll a dice and decide whether you're about to fudge that roll or whether you're about to keep that roll yourself.
You make that die roll very public.
Yeah, exactly.
By having someone else go, I rolled a 3, and everyone knows that's low. What does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's a really, really good tool, and one that is awesome. I just have to say, like, across the board, you're an exceedingly well put together GM that is looking at their game from many different angles, and not just within the game, and not just like when you're at the table, above the table, from over here, from this third angle, from a fourth angle, and I think it's very rare. Recently, we've done a few podcasts with some very interesting people. We just had the ADH DM on as well, and I feel like there's this kind of not new wave of GM, but there's a level of GMs that kind of fly under the surface, that are doing things that are spectacular, things that are super, super different. I've recently started doing a style where, I describe things similar to like the Spider-Verse in different styles of description, of like, trying to find ways to describe them in different ways that, will change the perspective of how the players are seeing the moment. I'm like, suddenly you see a watercolor splatter across the ground, as opposed to being like, oh, and blood hits you in the face and you're like, ew, blood, kind of thing. And so I really love these nuances of what I'm learning and the experience of these podcasts and what it's teaching me. So I just have to tell you, I've really, really appreciated this conversation and taken the time to learn a little bit about yourself and the amazing, I already thought you were super kick-ass from my years of watching you on Corridor and consuming your actual play content. But, it really does teach me a lot and make me question things that I do and things like that. So I appreciate you doing that for me because shit, man, I love learning and this one's been an educational one for me for sure.
As long as we're having fun playing our games, that's what really matters.
Yeah.
I do recommend though, as the GM, you roll the attacks because you have to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
They can't be the bad guy for each other.
Yeah. I agree with that.
But if you got a special ability like a dragon's breath, consider having someone else roll that.
I love it. Love it. Awesome. Well, dude, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. I know you're a super busy person, spinning many plates and crushing it out in the sphere. I do have
a question.
Yes, please.
We're clearly going to like the end point of this.
Yeah,
I do have a question.
Please. Yeah.
So one of the fun things about offering movie ideas as a pitch or a D&D adventure, everyone sits down, watch the movie, and they're all inspired by things that you're not expecting, right? One of my players for Dante's Peak wants to play the role of the greedy helicopter pilot who wants to overcharge people to get off the volcano. So he has a hot air balloon.
Amazing.
And I'm trying to think of some mechanics to run hot air balloons. Do you have a recommendation on how I can run that?
That is a wheelhouse that I am proficient in, as it so happens.
They call that a softball, I think.
Yeah. I believe that's no. So yeah, we created Sky Zephyrs, which is a vehicle mechanics system for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. We're hoping to update it for 1D&D down the line when I can be bothered to write mechanics again, because I just want to do some lore stuff in the next couple projects I do, because mechanics are freaking hard and very mind consuming. The answer to the question about a hot air balloon is hot air balloons are very difficult things, because realistically the way hot air balloons work is, I'm not sure how much you're aware about the mechanics of hot air balloons. Simply rising up and down is what then changes their direction. They use the air currents to fly, and typically the path of a hot air balloon is not predetermined. You cannot really choose where you land a hot air balloon. You kind of just got to cross your fingers and hope that the guy who's pulling the fire, is getting you in the right air currents to get you where he needs to go. So that is a very hard thing to kind of represent in a game. Now, using Sky Zephyrs, we have it where at the helm, you're using speed points of whatever vehicle you're using to set the path of your vehicle and how that's going to go. I would speculate, using our air zone rules, you could create some very interesting air zones for your game that would be very specific to possibly directional travel and which way it forces the balloon to go and things like that. And what you could then do is, instead of having speed points that are spent, you could make it more based on what is the wind direction in the air zone that you are currently flying in. So we give you 5 suggested air zones that are example air zones that you could use in your game that work as a tier system. Within that,
the air zones are the elevation levels, right?
Exactly. It's the height of what you're doing. So the way we've added 3-dimensional travel, because that's what flying in the sky is. It's 3-dimensional. It's not 2-dimensional. The way we've done that is by adding layers to it. So you could be like, I'm flying on the Terran zone, which is as close to the ground as you can be. Imagine, the trench dive in A New Hope, and you're like cutting through buildings or like flying around mountains and doing that kind of stuff. Or you're in the congestion zone where most of the Zephyrs are flying, and there's a lot of smog up here. A lot of people have landing platforms high up in the sky. That means that there's a lot more smog. It's harder to breathe up here. So equipment is forced upon players to wear so that they can not deal with constitution saving throws constantly because they're in this smoggy area, you know. Then there's the meridian zone, which is, you know, the best place to fly. It's the most calm, the most tranquil, the least amount of, you know, like storms and wind direction problems happening. You got the trade winds, where all wind directions that are favorable or unfavorable are doubling how much they're doing, how much they're affecting your ship and things like that. So, you know, the trade winds are used by traders so that they can go faster, or, you know, try and get up in there and slow another ship down, or things like that. So I would speculate, take what we've created, look at the air zones, look at the wind direction stuff that we have, look at the storm table that we have, and a bit side tangent. A big thing with Sky Zephyrs is we want every GM to take what we've created and make it yours. Make it fit your game. Make it suit what you need. We've given you the foundations. We are the building blocks. We're the Lego that you can then build up into whatever you want to do. So take the air zones, take the wind direction rules, take the storm rules, and create a way so that when they get in this hot air balloon and your player has the ability to change altitude every turn, whether they come down into it and the wind direction's against them and suddenly they're blowing backwards, or the wind direction's favorable and they're moving forwards in a way that they want to go, oh, suddenly they've entered a storm and, you know, they're in the eye of the storm, which means they're fine this round. But next round, you know, a lightning strike from the volcano hits the balloon and does damage, gives the balloon the compromised condition. Suddenly we're falling through air zones every turn and we need to repair the balloon quickly and all that kind of stuff. So that would be my suggestion of how I would go about running specifically a hot air balloon that doesn't have any sort of propellers or directional kind of turning and movement system. Now, if you want to add propellers and, you know, fans or sails or anything like that, which would allow a lot more, you know, control, then I would recommend using the standard movement rules and things like that we were bringing out in V2 of Sky Zephyrs. But that would be how I'd go about that. Do you have anything else you would add to that?
Dude, that was beautiful.
Thanks.
Was just
Thanks, dude.
It's almost like you've thought a lot about this.
It's almost like 8 months of my life were dedicated to this. But that would be how I'd go about it. Do you have any further questions or anything else about it that you'd be interested to know about?
Well, I liked first, where can I find all those rules? Are they somewhere online?
So currently, if you're a backer of the Kickstarter, you will have gotten V1 of the PDF, which we sent out to everyone, and we got the community to publicly playtest. We wanted everyone to test at their table, give us feedback. We wanted your guys' voices to be heard. We've now received that feedback. We've now written version 2 of the book, and we actually, today, I put the final letter on the page. We're sending it to the editor, doing final layout, and it will be released to the public probably end of December, early January. And people will be able to pre-order that now on our website. So they can go and pre-order the PDF or the hardcover book if they so please. But yes, I assume, and look, I'm not a perfect person, okay? I do things that are shifty sometimes. I'm sure that once it's released, it will be on things like AnyFlip and things like that where you can get free PDFs. If you want to go grab it on there, I mean, please, we'd love you to come and support us, but also we understand not everyone can afford stuff. So, you know, do what you need to do. But yeah, those would be the places I would recommend that you could get it. I'm not sure if you yourself are a backer. If you're not, we will send you V2 after this, Cmike, to make sure that you can utilize this for your hot air balloon stuff. The moment the V2 stuff is done, we will 100% send that over to you.
Good, because Dante's Peak we're playing in January.
Perfect. Perfect. Sorted.
We'll get you V2.
Yeah. And in the meantime, we'll get you V1 so you can start looking at that as well and start thinking about it ahead of time.
Hell yeah. The thing there's a lot going on in thinking about ships and vehicles. But something I really liked was, because I've played space combat with SW5E.
Oh, amazing. Okay, cool. Yeah. Awesome.
And there's a lot to be solved when it comes to vehicles. It's a different beast entirely. So bless you for doing the God's work and delivering what Paylor wants to us. what I liked was your variant rule on initiative, where rather than every little thing, then the ships, which feels like it's bloating initiative versus simplifying it. I like the variant option where we just go with the flying objects, and it's kind of a little bit of chaos of kind of teams, like who's doing what on each ship. It's far easier to track. It's a lower resolution. I really like that. I really like your air zone system because it really cleans up the idea of vertical move versus 5 feet, 10 feet. And it's like zones up here because this is a lower resolution thing that we don't need to think about all the time, but exists and can affect some details. I really love that thinking. Offering different crew is cool. Because I reading the PDF that you sent me, I was inspired because I was like, I can now see an adventure in the sky the way I DM.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to run an adventure in the sky and sit there and design a system plus prep an adventure while world building all at the same time.
Right.
And
Who would do that? That's crazy. What I like is, because one of the ways I world build is taking published adventures and source books that people have put countless amount of hours in and adapt it to my setting, right? Oh, I need a city. What's the Waterdeep book saying about cities? You know, I don't want that money to go to waste. I might as well apply that logic to what I'm doing. And the same 100%. Thing is you're offering that service and that thinking offload for so many GMs that are interested in sky stuff. Like in Aida, my world, there are no elemental planes. The Genasi are part of the world. Amazing. Love that.
So what you would find in the water plane is in the ocean. What you would find in the fire plane exists maybe in the deserts or near the volcanoes. What you would find in the earth realm exists in the mountains under the earth. Maybe I mix that with the Underdark so they're together. Yeah. The air Genasi in the air realm, those are in the skies. I remember I was flying from Texas to California and I was looking out the window and I was just seeing the clouds were lined up just right in like their zone-like way. And I was like, I could see people riding and climbing clouds.
Hell yeah.
And when I thought about Cloud City from Star Wars, I'm like, you know, the title of that is so disappointing when you see it's just a city, a metal city in the sky. Yeah. Why isn't a city actually built out of the clouds?
I love that.
So it's a fun idea, but I can't apply that to an adventure. How do I get, hey, this half elf and this dwarf up into the sky without just like, and you guys fly up there. There's no fun gameplay on the journey to the sky.
Totally. Yeah.
And I really appreciate the work you put in and what you're offering to the community, because
thank you.
It's amazing.
Dude, truly, like I said, that was, you know, Sky Zephyrs has been, I've said this many times in many different videos, shorts, you know, things like that. And it's the truest way that I can say it is, you know, I built my world, which is a world of floating islands. And my world, I fell in love with that concept from Avatar, the James Cameron movie. I really, you know, pieced it from there and was like, man, imagine a place where you're having to hop islands and get around and do all this stuff. And obviously, you know, I did the same thing everyone else does. Ghost of Soulmarsh doesn't cut it. Descent into Avernus doesn't cut it. Spelljammer doesn't cut it. Wildjammer doesn't really cut it. Star Wars 5e doesn't really cut it. You know, all these different things. And when I started designing Sky Zephyrs, it was a labor of love for my game. It was a thing that I needed in my world and a thing that I was craving, and actually I put it off for a good year because I was like, this is too much. I'm not I'm not developed enough as a GM to be able to handle this task. And then when I felt I was ready, I dove into it. And the way I describe Sky Zephyrs is, it is my love song to the TTRPG community. It is something that I have written, and it's my love song to you guys. And all that I hope from the community is, people can, just like any music, tell me that you freaking hate it. Tell me that you freaking love it. You play it once, play it 1,000,000 times. I just hope it gets played on repeat within people's lives, and that they get to enjoy what I've created, because I really enjoyed building it, along with, my writing partner, Tony, along with our artist, Alex, along with our layout artist, Chris Hopper. And, and it came together from all these beautiful minds putting their heads together and creating this just freaking awesome supplement that I'm so, so proud of. And the final thing that I wanted to just add to something you said is, Sky Zephyrs, like I said, is designed to be modularized. We've made systems for almost every little thing, air zones, wind directions, storms, air crew, feats for players, boarding, landing, grappling, repairs, movement, combat, shooting across different zones, creatures, items, spells, we've made all these different systems. And the goal here is, you guys choose what's required for your world. If you want one thing that we've put in that book, if you just want the shanties that we've written in the downtime section because you need a good sky shanty for your world, then take a shanty out the book. If you want a single item that we've got,
take a shanty.
Exactly. Take a shanty. Take an item. Take, the wind direction. Take the movement. Whatever suits what you need, pull it out. You don't have to use all of it. It all works together, but you don't have to use all of it. It all works separately as well. That's why I designed it like that. And the final thing I'll say, that is something that you would have probably not gotten the quick start, and the V1 people did get a little peek at, and the V2 people will get a refined version of, is we also expanded these rules because Sky is my thing. I love Sky. Sky's my thing. But other people love space. Other people love naval. Other people love subnautical, and other people love land. And all of those places have vehicles. Surprising, right? So we actually made conversion stuff for all of our rules so that you can run the same stuff we have for the sky, but for water, for under the water, for in space and on land. So not only is this book something that you can use for your sky, taking your players up to the cloud city, but you can also use it to go check out Atlantis, go check out the Astral Sea, go do a Mad Max campaign where, you're tearing across the land in, metal ass vehicles that are sick.
Right.
Please, use it for all that stuff. That's what we envisioned when we created this.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but broad strokes speaking, the air zones are essentially flipped upside down to be depth, right?
Dead on. Exactly.
Right.
100%. 100%.
Having those universal systems for D&D is what makes it so much more playable and expandable. Combat in D&D is a universal tool on how to deal with conflict in combat.
Yeah.
Right. And it's, I made a video about this, traveling, not the old video, but a newer one that's coming out, is I've taken travel from 1E and applied it to 5E.
Love it.
Because it is a universal travel system that feels like combat. We have turns. We either get in a combat, and a day is like one turn, done. Fast travel, 1 turn's a week. Slow travel, 1 turn's a third of a day. But it's the same universal system when it comes to long form travel. And it's one of those problems that, like you solved, is we need a universal subsystem for this game. That can be applied to all things that are related to this. Vehicles, just one vehicle system. Yeah. Players and GMs alike don't need to have a different thing for cars, boats, and planes. I don't know if you can hear that lawnmower outside. And having a universal system is a game changer. It makes it so much easier to memorize. It's like, what if every cleric was a different system versus having a core cleric and then subclasses?
Yeah, right.
That would be so annoying.
Yeah, right. I think
great job.
First of all, thank you for all of the amazing compliments. Truly, like, I can't tell you how much it means, not only coming from you personally, but also just hearing someone who is taking the time to read it and understand some of the stuff that we put into it. And that just means truly a mountain to me. Like, more than I like, we spoke the other day with someone, you can't express gratitude in a way that is right with words. And that truly means more than I will ever be able to express to you in this video call. But thank you for that. And we really hope that people find it like that. And, at the moment, Sky Zephyrs is a small thing. We had 800 incredible people come and back the project and come and believe in what we do, come and see, like what we do. And we hope that over the years, people suddenly start finding it and start discovering it. And a friend tells them, hey, you want vehicles? Oh, check this out, And so I'm just thankful that I got a chance to be that person. I'm super thankful that I got an opportunity to step up to the plate and hopefully knock it out the park for people. So no, yeah, very, very much appreciate that. And I appreciate you seeing that. Like I said, just means a fucking lot. It really means a lot that people are seeing that out there and understanding it and appreciating it. So,
and turning this whole podcast around.
Yeah.
How did that just happen?
What just happened?
Jedi mind tricked us into, do you want to close the show? Because it's your show now.
This is not the Cmike you're looking for. Dude, I'll hand it back right over to you. Please tell the people where they can find your content, what you've got coming up, what projects you want them to go check out, and where people can just kind of go and gravitate to the amazing work you're doing at the moment.
Thank you for the opportunity to let everyone who's still listening to come find me. I may have bored many of them away. Come on over to Fables D20. It's on YouTube. Me and my friends, we play Dungeons and Dragons, and in the near future, some other tabletop games as well. We've played the Alien RPG, which is freaking amazing. We have a Patreon, same name, Fables D20. But we don't just play play games. I do homebrew videos. And like I mentioned earlier, Chris and I are doing lore podcasts, so that way we're talking about world building and lore to make D&D our own thing. And our actual plays are edited cinematically, camera switching, sound effects, sound design, music. It's a lot of work, and it's just stuff that I love. I stream every Tuesday on the channel, crafting and painting these sick D&D stairs that take weeks to make. That's kind of what I'm doing online, and I really enjoy it. Every adventure, as we mentioned before, is inspired by movies, something that I really love. And what I'm experimenting behind the scenes is adapting the adventures that we play into sellable modules. So
awesome.
Curse of Amity Island, which is based off of Jaws. We're working on a book, which, because this is another thing to learn. If you ever want to learn how to be a great GM, record the game. Doesn't have to be cameras, just record it with a microphone and listen back. Another way to do it, was your adventure too bloated or not? Adapt it into a book and you'll know if you bloated it or not. So that's stuff that I'm working on.
Hell yeah. Well, do you know what? That's kick ass. And you know what? It has been an honor, a pleasure, a learning experience, and just some of the best 2 hours that we've had podcasting.
Really great.
Tom and I are actually going to be rounding out some of our podcasting content next year, sharpening the arrow to things that, we really want to push forward to. So, as we're coming to the end of kind of our is it third season of HaTD podcasts. We are so thankful to have had you on, to have you be part of this, and dude, thank you so much for coming. We very much appreciate it. Like, very much fucking appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, and congratulations on your success and the first step to even more successes.
Thank you, dude. Thank you.
You too, man.
As always, we've been Homie and the Dude, the father and son, TTRPG, and MMAT. If you would like to check out what we do here at Homie and the Dude, the best place to do so, we've got our YouTube channel, subscribe to that. But as well as that, we have our Discord community. It's a super inclusive, diverse space, safe space of amazing TTRPG people that shoot the shit, talk about goofy things, as well as also give advice, hang out, and we will be in the next year running workshops for GMs and players alike, where we will be teaching you guys some stuff, refining your guys' games, as well as also partaking in activities as a group through Discord, and hopefully getting to know all of you a little bit better.
We may even be inviting guest GMs to participate and share their words of wisdom.
Oh.
Just putting it out there.
So, guys, thank you so much for watching. We super appreciate it. And we will catch you guys in the next episode. See you then. Bye.
You won't catch me. This is my only episode. Bye, guys.